This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with hustro.com, a leading construction management software tool. Hello everybody, I'm the Gaffer, Gavin Coyle, back here again, and I just want to have a quick topic with you today, which is all about new entrants and new people coming into the construction space. And how do we look after them? How do we protect them? How do we make sure that they become the leaders of the next generation of construction industry giants or construction industry leaders in their own right? What do we need to do in order to prepare them and mind them so that they can then pass on that education, if you like, in such a way that we create this conveyor belt of consistent quality construction leaders? Or they don't even need to be leaders. They could be just really good tradespeople in the field that have excelled because they've been given the opportunity by you and your team and your company and the people around you to learn how construction works and how best to get the most out of their skill set and their work ethic. And I think work ethic is probably one of the biggest things that when we speak to leaders in construction is, Gavin, we can teach them the technicality, but if they don't have the work ethic, it really falls on deaf ears and it doesn't go anywhere and it becomes a waste of people's time. And that is the disappointing part of something like this, is because so many people are involved in the onboarding of somebody new. It doesn't have to be a new entrant into construction, but just in general. If you think about the touch points of how many people are involved in the hiring process. So, for example, let's just take that back. Somebody is needed within the construction company. So there's a business case. In some cases there's not. In some cases there is a business case that's produced. Why do we need this person? Where do we need them? Do we have enough work for them? How much are we going to pay this person? What's their, additional requirements going to be? Is it a car? Is it, expenses in general? Maybe they need further education. Do they need healthcare, etc., etc. So all of that takes time and labor to put that together. Then you might very well go to your recruitment team. If you have a recruitment team, maybe you might not. You might go direct yourself to LinkedIn and post or use marketing campaign, which is going to cost you money, obviously, to post that job. Or you might use a recruitment agency or a freelancer, or you might be posting in journals. It's pretty much whatever strategy is. But again, it's all time consuming. And then you have the situation whereby you're shortlisting people, you're communicating back and forward, you're arranging interviews. You don't need me to go through the whole process. We're all used to knowing what the normal route is in order for somebody to look for somebody and also for somebody to look to be hired or placed within a project. So taking on a new entrant is no different in a lot of cases, but we do see obviously the university connection where, companies would favour certain universities because they would have seen or would have had experience of previous hires from the same universities, and therefore they might have a good relationship with the university to say, look, we want to do a open day within the college where you would turn up with your banners and your pop-ups and basically bring 2 or 3 people of your company together on that day. It could be an overall careers day, or it could be something that you have arranged with the university, and you're open to talking to people and to students about, when they finish up at the end of that semester, where they're going to go, how they're going to get placed, and the opportunities that exist within your company. So again, more time, all consuming. Time is money. You're distracted from the main business. And if you're a small company, you might not be able to have the time to do some of this stuff. So you could very well be just relying on recruitment agencies or your LinkedIn recruitment strategy to bring in these people. Communication in terms of when you do take these people on board, it's so important to not, and we see this a good bit, companies tend to produce this fantastic specification, and sometimes, or a lot of times, it's nearly overreaching in terms of, it's you're looking for something that's probably not really there. And if it's there, it's very rare. And, the specification is probably nearly over the top in terms of what you're looking for. So we'd always say to try and keep the specification basic enough to the point of, it's something that you will have to be relying on later on. So if something goes wrong, and then you've had all these fancy additions in your specification. And to be fair, for somebody that has never worked in construction or very hardly ever worked in construction, some of the obligations that might be in their specification, might be something for a year 2 or a year 3 construction person rather than a new entrant. And that's a very important distinction to make, because we've seen specifications that are like, wow, if we could get a new entrant like that, why wouldn't you be bringing on 5 or 6 people every year? But the reality is, a lot of these people won't be able to hit a lot of the requirements that you might have in your specification. So I suppose what we're trying to say is be common, be very practical about what you're asking people to do. And remember that these people are coming in completely green into your organization. So it's more important that you speak with your team and communicate with your team as regards what does an academy type approach look like in your organization. Now, you don't have to be so fancy with calling it an academy, but it is like an institution that you're bringing these people into, regardless of whether you're less than 10 employees or 20 employees or 50 employees. You're bringing people into a scenario where you need them to flourish, but you also need to have boundaries, and you also need to have a structure in such that people can follow and that they can easily understood. And if your own people don't know the structure or haven't been given the structure from when they joined, how the hell are they going to pass that on to the new entrant? So we would always say put a lot of time and effort, and even it could take a year of talking and putting policies and procedures and structures in place to create a scenario whereby there is no grey areas in what your program is to bring people in. But you're doing it in such a way that you're creating a situation where failure points are minimized to the very least. And if there is failure points, you can always go back to your program that you've developed and sort of update the program to a point of, okay, we need to sort of move the dial a little bit here because we didn't allow for this, or we didn't think about that. And so you might have to go through 2 or 3 bad hires before you actually get your model, in such a way that you're minimizing that risk of taking on a bad hire. And that's really what you're trying to do here, is that you're trying to eliminate as much risk out of the hire as possible. And unfortunately for some employers, they fall into the category of, well, this person's coming cheap by comparison to what I would normally pay. So therefore, I'm willing to take the chance. If you come at it from that direction, it's not going to go anywhere, because you may very well be lucky in 1 or 2 instances, but you're not doing it for the right reasons. You're not creating a culture for the right reasons. And, your own employees will look back at this and go, you're just here trying to get people on the cheap, and we're trying to get a job done. And then I'm getting distracted to try and train this person. And this person doesn't tick the boxes in a lot of cases. So we had some really good people on the I'm the Gaffer podcast in the past, and you can go back and listen to some of the episodes where I remember the owner saying, yeah, I hop into the truck with this guy. I spend the first couple of weeks in the truck going from job to job with him, and just seeing how that person, interacts with our guys. Now, they might be introverted in such a way, or they might be very slow starters in terms of integrating themselves, because they're trying to figure out what the hell's going on and where do I fit in. And so they might be very introvert in a way, but don't let that fool you, because in a lot of cases, the quiet ones are the ones that really are the ones that can flourish later on, because they're absorbing a lot of things. And then, on the flip side of things, you can have somebody that's highly engaged, highly motivated, highly getting involved, and now really wants to go and get things done. You kind of have to watch for that as well, because that person might be putting on a front to try and, give you this confidence that they're confident that they can do this job and they're going to be a go-getter. But we've seen it in a lot of cases where, because they've come out of the traps firing on all cylinders, they can't keep that up. And eventually they start burning themselves out, because this high energy, with the best will in the world, like a construction site is one real place to sort of level people off and see who's who, because it's a long road. And, what you want is a nice structured workforce that's balanced and that everybody is working at the same pace. And yeah, you will have times when you have to up that pace, but it's measured and it's controlled. And if there's an additional piece of labour that needs to be brought on to that project to deliver the extra scale, well, then, you have it measured to that point. But, the point I'm trying to make is you don't want people just flying into a project and sort of, it nearly creates this great buzz and this person's great. And next thing, all of a sudden, the handlebar starts coming off the bike and you start seeing gaps with people. So you want to slowly embed these people into your company. You don't want them, coming in like a trailblazer. And if they do, sit them down and say, look, relax now, because this is a long road, and it's not something that you need to go 100 miles an hour on. And we get your enthusiasm, but it's got to have to be packaged up in the right way. And I remember starting as a young labourer, and it wasn't long before, I realised that less words or more action was the call of the day, in the sense that it was all about the work. And this guy that I was under when I started was the guy that was setting the tone. And the way he set his tone was hard work, non-stop. And, got to the stage where you were kind of like, I'm not going to even ask this guy what time he's going to take lunch or what time he's going to take a break, because if we do, I'm probably going to be out the door. So I'll just take my breaks when he takes his breaks. It just turned out that this particular guy didn't like to take breaks. So you just had to go with it. Now in today's health and safety environment, that won't happen in terms of people need to take breaks and rest breaks, etc., etc. But the point of the matter is you're there to work and you're there to set the tone. And, it's very important that you pick the right supervisor or the right project manager to work with these people. So there's certain project managers that are totally focused on delivering on the job. And when it comes to distractions, and they might look at this as a distraction, they might say, no, I'll take them in, yeah, because I have to. But, I don't have time to educate this person. I don't have time to put my time into this person. So there's got to be a collaborative get together and a commitment from everybody that if they take this person on, that we're all, putting our time and effort into the person. And, again, another reason why you want to take your time before you decide to bring some of these people in. And you have to take the view as well. Some of these entrants will take a job with you thinking, okay, I'll get in and get my foot in the door with this guy, because, they're not my number one company. I want to go to a tier 1 company, but at least it gets my foot in the ladder, and at least it gets me some wages that I can, live off. And then if I get a bit of time within this company, I'll start sending my CVs out. That's demoralizing for a company, that you're putting that time and effort into somebody, and then all they're thinking about is the exit door and how they're going to get out. Now, there is cases where, we've seen companies, and the model is, take them in for 2 or 3 years, build them up. We know we're going to lose them, but we have a program for that. So if your program is that way, well then, be very clear with yourself that, well, we're going to lose people. We know we're going to lose people to tier 1s after after 6 months or after a year with these people. But, if you tie them down into a contract of, we've seen even 6 months probation period. Some people are steadfast. Oh, you need to do months probation. Not really. You can talk to your lawyers and you can talk to HR. You can push out the probation period. And even still, if it's a short probation period, you can give yourself the option to extend the probation period at the end of the first stage of the probation period. And that keeps people on their toes. It's, I'm not saying that probation should be used as a tool to abuse a situation, but probation are used there to see how the performance of the individual reacts within this environment that you have. And they are a good tool. So, talk to your HR consultant or your advisor and say, look, we know we're going to lose people here because they're always going to be looking for more money and they're always going to be looking for the bigger company to go to. Can we work together with a program so that, we at least get a year out of these people? And then hopefully they might turn around and have a different viewpoint and say, look, do you know what? Small is beautiful. And I think I'd prefer to stay where I am right now because it's a kind of a small community. I really like working here. I really like getting on with everybody. But that all, that all stems from creating the culture and creating mentors. Like supervisors in general don't see themselves as mentors. Project managers don't see themselves as mentors. But, maybe you need to bring in another team or an external team to develop a mentor program where your project managers can go off site for a day and do a workshop on what it is to be a mentor and how to mentor people and how to get the best out of people. Stuff like that is, it's not hairy fairy. It's like really, really positive stuff. You're giving good training to your people. You're identifying within your own team, maybe shortages of this particular aspect. And it's something that they can take with them for the foreseeable as well. So because, who knows, they might not be a project manager forever and they need to they might turn themselves into some sort of a champion for the business in terms of your academy, back to the word academy. But like, what I mean by that in terms of working on a conveyor belt of bringing really smart, great work ethic people into the business. And, when we go back to work ethic, not enough questions are asked about people's backgrounds. Have you come from a farming background? Have you come from a construction background? What did your brothers and sisters do? These are really good questions in terms of understanding the environment that this person has grown up in. And we tend to sort of, I've spoken to somebody only recently and they're like, I absolutely hate doing interviews. I was like a large corporate business. And I was like, you shouldn't be that way. Like, and I know what the person was saying. The person was saying that they were held to a certain structure of an interview and they weren't allowed to sort of go outside of that structure because it was a corporate program. And it was disappointing because the questions weren't getting to the real person, to understand the real person and the person, the person behind the name, if you like. Are you into sport? Is your family into sport? Do you like reading? All that kind of good stuff. Like, and the other point as well is we tend to only interview once, and I think that's a problem too. I think you'll never really get to know people until you get them on the job, but you should be doing at least 2 or 3 interviews because you want to make the person feel that, God, I had to jump through hoops to get this job. And like, this is just a small company. Imagine, like, I actually feel kind of, that I've earned a badge by them offering me this job because I went to like 2 interviews or 3 interviews. And I mean, like, HR could interview, project manager could interview, the CEO can interview, people can interview jointly, people can interview in threes. But I get a formula together whereby, you're bringing them through a funnel of personality, technicality, behavioral aspects and stuff like that. And big fan in terms of looking at people's behaviors and looking at, tools that you can use, like speak to some of the HR guys in terms of understanding, does this person work well in teams? Do they not work well in teams? Do they work well on their own? What kind of, speed of thought do they have? All of these characteristics can be part of your interview process. And again, don't think that you're a small company, you can't do this. You can absolutely do this at a reasonable cost. And if you look at the failures of recruitment, and this is where we speak to owners as well, they get very demoralized that they've distracted the whole team to bring on this person. They've then, given 110% behind this person, and the person has let them down. Couldn't turn up for work. Everything they said was partially true or not true. And, you know, you tend to see that there's sort of like a 12-month, 24-month where the company won't hire anybody because they're afraid to, because their confidence is knocked, and because they're saying, okay, well, we need to get back to work now because this person has actually made things worse for us. So having a good relationship with the college, you know, having a good relationship with the instructors and tutors in the college, and like, you know, if they're spending all the time with these people, where are they coming into the lectures? Do they make sure that what kind of attendance did they have in the lectures? Were they communicative in the lectures? Did they engage? How do you think they engaged with the other students? Like, were they active? You know, did they play sports in the college? That kind of stuff. Loads of stuff that you can get touch points. And again, if you're not confident, if you know somebody that is in the space of recruitment and hiring, you know, to get them to go to the college and sort of, you know, put together these questions. Love to hear your comments. I'd love to hear your feedback. We could talk about it all day, and I know that it's a very challenging topic, and especially with the shortage of labour and the continued shortage of labour within the construction industry. Would love to get some sort of your points and feedback on it. And if you think there's any other topics that we could discuss, please put them in the show notes. So don't forget to subscribe and like to us if you're on YouTube, and we're on all the usual places where you get your podcasts. So please, you know, support the community, because it helps us bring on more and more guests. And if you like the show, give us a thumbs up. See you on the next episode, guys. All the best. Hello, gaffers. Hope you're enjoying the podcast. We love every one of the guests that we have, but in order to bring on more great guests, we'd love to build the channel with you. So hit the subscribe, hit the like button, and let's create a really great community where we bring in better and better guests for you to deliver great content and great pieces of information that you can take back into your business.